When the mind finally rests, a silence deeper than sleep takes over. It is not the absence of thought, it is the awakening of awareness beyond thought. Most people spend their entire lives caught in the storm of their minds, chasing peace as if it is somewhere outside. But true peace begins only when the mind learns to sit still. In that stillness, life reveals its beauty, its clarity, and its boundless intelligence. The restless mind is like a noisy marketplace where thoughts collide and scatter in every direction. Peace cannot enter such a space because it is already filled with noise. The more you chase silence, the louder the mind becomes, constantly seeking attention. When one learns to simply watch the noise without reacting to it, a gap appears between the thought and the thinker. In that gap, stillness begins to grow, not because you force it, but because you stop feeding the noise with your resistance. To rest the mind does not mean to stop thinking, it means the thoughts no longer hold you captive. The mind can keep moving, but you remain untouched, like the sky unaffected by the passing clouds. The habit of constant stimulation keeps the mind alive in chaos, it thrives on drama and distraction. But when silence is allowed to exist, the mind begins to lose its power. In that silence, awareness becomes sharper and a natural intelligence arises beyond reasoning or memory. When the mind is restless, life appears fragmented, disconnected and heavy. But when it rests, everything becomes whole. The mind may still function, but it does so with clarity instead of confusion. True rest is not found in sleep but in presence. When you are fully here, without dragging the weight of the past or worrying about what comes next, the mind finds peace. In that state, existence itself becomes effortless. Even the smallest act carries depth and calm. Resting the mind does not mean forcing thoughts to disappear or struggling to silence them. It means breaking the invisible chain that ties you to them. The mind will always move, its nature is to create thoughts, ideas and judgments. But when you stop identifying with every thought that passes through, the grip of the mind weakens, thoughts no longer drag you into unnecessary emotions or confusion. You begin to witness them like clouds drifting across the sky, appearing and dissolving on their own without your interference. To rest the mind is to stop fighting with it. Many people exhaust themselves trying to control their mental patterns, believing that peace comes from domination. But real peace begins when control ends. The mind, when left unbothered, finds its own rhythm. In that rhythm, there is a deep, effortless silence. Not because you silenced the mind, but because you stepped out of its noise. The awareness that watches thoughts is always still. The moment you rest in that awareness, the mind naturally becomes light. The mind becomes restless because it believes it must solve everything. It tries to fix, analyze and protect you from the unknown. But the truth is, most of life doesn't need fixing, it only needs your presence. When the mind learns to rest, it stops creating endless stories and simply allows life to unfold. You begin to see that peace was never something to find, it was always beneath the noise. The storm of thought hides it, but once the storm calms, peace shines by itself. The mind feeds on constant stimulation because it thrives on activity and distraction. It needs something to chew on, whether it is memories, worries, plans or fears. It cannot bear stillness because stillness exposes its emptiness. When you keep feeding the mind with endless information, entertainment and conversation, it grows louder and hungrier. But when you begin to withdraw this food, when you stop responding to every impulse and stop chasing every thought, the mind starts to lose its power. In that deprivation, it begins to settle down like waves calming after a storm. Silence is the space where the mind has nothing to grasp. It is the mirror that reflects the mind's true restlessness. At first, silence feels uncomfortable because it challenges the mind's dominance. But as you sit with it, something deeper awakens. The energy that once ran wildly through thoughts begins to return to awareness. The constant inner noise slowly fades, revealing a quiet strength that was always there, hidden beneath layers of mental clutter. In silence, the mind cannot pretend, it cannot hide behind excuses or distractions. It is forced to face itself. This confrontation is what most people fear, yet it is the doorway to real freedom. When the chaos of thoughts starts to starve, awareness begins to shine. It is like a fire burning brighter when the smoke clears. The mind, no longer inflated by constant stimulation, becomes light, clear and precise. It learns its place not as the ruler, but as a servant of consciousness. When the mind learns to rest in silence, every moment becomes sharper, deeper and more alive. There is no dullness in stillness, there is immense vitality. The senses awaken more fully, and even the smallest detail of life begins to speak with clarity. You no longer react to life through old mental patterns. Instead, you respond from a space of calm understanding. The silence that once seemed empty now becomes a source of boundless energy and awareness. When the mind is active, it divides life into countless pieces, labeling, comparing and judging everything it encounters. It creates walls between what it likes and what it dislikes, between what it desires and what it fears. This endless division turns life into conflict, a constant struggle between opposites. The restless mind cannot see things as they are, it only sees through the filters of its own opinions and memories. Every moment is distorted by thought, and in that distortion, peace disappears. When the mind rests, the divisions collapse and you begin to experience life as one seamless flow, not as fragments fighting for meaning. An active mind keeps jumping from one thought to another, never staying still long enough to see clearly. It thrives on movement, yet that very movement keeps it blind. It analyzes everything, trying to understand life through logic. Yet the essence of life cannot be measured by logic. The constant chatter of thought drowns the quiet truth that exists beneath it. The more you think, the less you perceive. But when the mind finds rest, perception becomes direct and effortless. You begin to see not through memory or desire, but through pure awareness that does not distort. Living in fragments means being pulled apart by conflicting emotions and desires. The mind craves something one moment and rejects it the next. It clings to pleasure and runs from pain, never realizing both belong to the same movement. This fragmentation keeps a person tired, anxious and unsatisfied. The mind creates problems where none exist, then suffers trying to solve them. But in the rest of the mind, all these contradictions disappear. There is no longer a battle between good and bad, success and failure, or right and wrong. There is only clarity. True rest does not come from sleep because sleep only quiets the body, not the mind. You may wake up from hours of sleep still burdened by the same confusion, the same weight of thought. Presence, however, silences the noise that sleep cannot touch. When you are fully here, when your attention is not wandering between what was and what could be, the mind finds stillness without effort. Presence is the state where time loses its grip, and in that timeless space, rest becomes natural. It is not something you create, it is what remains when resistance ends. Being fully here means allowing each moment to be exactly as it is. Most people are not living, they are constantly escaping into memories or projections. They fight the present because it rarely fits their expectations. This resistance is what keeps the mind in turmoil. The moment you stop opposing life, you realize there was never anything to fight. The present moment demands nothing from you except your awareness. In that simple recognition, rest arises, not as an act of control, but as a surrender to what already is. The restless mind constantly tries to fix, change, or improve what exists. It wants to make reality match its imagination, and in this endless struggle, exhaustion becomes inevitable. But when you allow presence to replace struggle, you step into the flow of life. Things continue to happen, but they no longer drain you. You act when action is needed and remain still when stillness is required. This balance between doing and being is the true rhythm of rest, where effort and peace coexist without conflict. Resistance is the silent thief of energy. Every time you argue with what life presents, you burn inner strength for nothing. The mind becomes like a clenched fist, tight, rigid and tired. When you let go of this tension, the same energy transforms into clarity and vitality. Resting in presence does not make you passive, it makes you powerful without aggression, calm without indifference. You stop forcing outcomes and begin to trust the intelligence that moves through all things. The mind was designed to serve life, not to dominate it. It was created as an instrument to calculate, to plan, and to help you survive, but over time, it began to claim authority over your existence. When the mind becomes the master, it traps you in endless loops of thought, pulling you away from direct experience. It commands instead of assists, confuses instead of clarifies. The moment you forget that the mind is a tool, it becomes a tyrant dictating your every emotion and decision. But when you place it back in its rightful position, its power becomes purposeful instead of destructive. When the mind rules, it constantly seeks control, always trying to shape the world according to its ideas. It cannot accept the unpredictability of life, so it lives in fear of losing what it clings to. Every situation becomes a battlefield, every person a reflection of its own insecurity. Yet, when you see the mind as a tool, not the master, the struggle ends. You use it when needed and you let it rest when not. It becomes sharp and efficient because it no longer carries the unnecessary weight of control. A mind that has learned its place becomes a precise instrument. It thinks only when thought is required and remains silent otherwise. Its clarity sharpens perception, allowing you to see beyond illusion. When the mind stops reacting to everything it encounters, awareness begins to guide life. Decisions are no longer made from fear or attachment, but from understanding. This is the natural state of balance, where the mind serves intelligence rather than pretending to be it. Observation without judgment is the doorway through which the mind finds peace. The constant need to label, categorize, and evaluate everything keeps the mind in ceaseless motion. It cannot see reality as it is because it is always busy comparing what is happening to what it wants to happen. Every judgment creates resistance, and resistance breeds conflict. When you look at life without the burden of interpretation, the noise begins to fade. You start to see things with freshness, uncolored by memory or bias. In that clarity, the mind begins to rest naturally. The act of judging drains energy because it constantly divides experience into right and wrong, pleasant and unpleasant. This division fragments awareness and traps it in endless reaction. The mind keeps swinging between attachment and aversion, losing balance in both directions. But when observation becomes pure, the pendulum stops. You begin to experience life directly, without distortion. The mind that observes without judgment is not dull or detached. It is alert, alive and free from confusion. To see life as it is requires immense stillness. It means allowing things to be without immediately trying to change or improve them. The mind finds this difficult because it survives through interference. It wants to alter, control and define. But the moment you stop interfering, perception deepens. You begin to sense a quiet intelligence within everything around you. The tree, the sound, the breath, all begin to reveal their own truth when you stop forcing yours upon them. This is not indifference, but awareness without resistance. When you observe without judgment, even your own thoughts lose their grip. You can watch them rise and fall like waves without being pulled under. Emotions lose their violence because you no longer fuel them with reaction. Every thought, every feeling becomes part of a larger flow that moves through you but does not belong to you. This detachment is not escape, it is freedom from identification. The mind rests because it no longer needs to fight itself. The one who observes without judgment lives in complete harmony with existence. There is no separation between the observer and the observed, no constant struggle to prove or protect an identity. Life simply unfolds and you remain aware, silent and clear. In that state, truth is not something to find, it reveals itself. The mind becomes transparent like still water reflecting everything without distortion. This transparency is the true rest of the mind, where awareness stands pure and untouched. When the mind stops reacting, life begins to move through you instead of against you. Reaction is the automatic echo of habit and conditioning, a mechanical loop that keeps you trapped in repetitive patterns. Every thought that arises triggers a response before awareness can even notice it. And in that constant reactivity, the mind is never at rest. When you create space between stimulus and response, you open a doorway to conscious action. In that space, the mind no longer dictates life, life flows through a clear, aware mind. Responding consciously means choosing action from a place of clarity rather than compulsion. The restless mind reacts impulsively, guided by fear, desire, or past conditioning. But a mind that rests sees the movement of life as it is and acts with precision and purpose. There is no wasted energy, no turmoil over outcomes, no emotional turbulence driving decisions. Response emerges naturally from awareness, intelligent and effortless, because it is not polluted by reactive patterns. Mechanical existence keeps life flat, repetitive and predictable. The mind constantly reacts, replaying old memories, expectations and fears, unaware that it has the power to step beyond them. Resting the mind interrupts this loop. You begin to notice the automatic nature of your reactions, and in that noticing, freedom arises. Life ceases to be a series of forced actions and becomes a deliberate unfolding. You live each moment with presence rather than habit, and the quality of existence transforms entirely. Living consciously requires courage because the mind resists change. It clings to its old reactions, fearing the unknown and the loss of control. Yet in the surrender to awareness, these fears dissolve. The mind becomes an ally instead of a tyrant, allowing you to navigate life with balance and clarity. Each response becomes an expression of inner alignment rather than outer compulsion. The power of the mind is no longer spent on endless reactions, but directed toward purposeful engagement with reality. Conscious living transforms perception itself. When the mind rests and reacts no longer, the world appears sharper, richer and more vivid. You no longer move blindly through existence, but with full presence in every thought, word and action. Life is no longer something to endure or control, it is something to participate in fully. In this state, the mind is calm, clear and awake, and every action becomes a reflection of awareness rather than habit. This is the true liberation of living consciously. When the mind rests, the boundaries of the self begin to dissolve. Thoughts no longer define who you are, and emotions no longer control your every movement. The constant chatter that once seemed necessary to prove identity falls silent, and in that silence, a vastness emerges. You begin to realize that the mind is only a part of your existence, not the entirety of it. When the mind stops clinging to every passing sensation and idea, Your awareness expands beyond the usual confines of personal identity. Emotions no longer dictate the rhythm of your life. When the mind is restless, joy, anger, fear, and desire dominate every decision, shaping reality according to their intensity. But in the rest of the mind, emotions are observed rather than absorbed. They are no longer markers of your being but simply movements within it. This detachment does not mean indifference, it means clarity. You experience the depth of every feeling without being trapped in it, and in that clarity, your being grows larger than the fleeting currents of emotion. Thoughts lose their authority when the mind rests. Most of the mental noise exists to reinforce a story about yourself, to maintain an identity built on memory, expectation and comparison. When the mind is still, these stories dissolve. Thought becomes a tool to navigate life rather than a chain that binds you to it. You can think without being trapped by thought, and this freedom opens a vast space where your awareness can expand beyond limits you never realized were imposed upon you. Identity itself becomes fluid. The labels and roles you have carried, friend, parent, worker, thinker, no longer confine your experience. They are understood as useful patterns rather than truths about your existence. In the rest of the mind, the rigid walls of identity dissolve and you begin to experience life as a continuous, flowing presence. You are no longer fragmented by who you think you are or what you believe you must be. Your being becomes as wide and deep as existence itself. In this state, life is no longer filtered through the lens of limitation. Every sensation, every interaction and every moment of awareness is felt fully, without restriction. The mind, once restless and controlling, becomes a silent observer and your being moves through life freely. The expansion that arises is not something to achieve, it is the natural outcome of a mind that has found rest. You exist not as a set of thoughts, emotions or identities, but as the vast, aware presence in which all of them arise and pass.